A coach jolted to a halt before the Willow Creek station, stirring up dust that glistened in the waning September sunlight of 1873. Thalorin Montclair stood upright on the wooden platform, his worn hat pulled low against the sun's glare as he watched the approaching coach. His hand instinctively checked his pocket watch for the fourth time, then smoothed his neatly trimmed beard. After 5 years of isolated ranching in the Wyoming territory, he was finally going to meet the woman who had consented to be his wife. The driver descended, arching his back before moving to open the door. "It was a grueling trip from Cheyenne," he grumbled to Thalorin. "Your mail-order bride is inside. She hasn't uttered a word the entire journey." Thalorin acknowledged him with a nod, his mouth suddenly parched. His exchange with Miss Aeloria Stonecarver had been concise but encouraging. A 22-year-old schoolteacher from Boston seeking a new beginning out west. Her letters had been articulate and considerate, hinting at a practical woman who grasped the implications of marrying a rancher. The coach door creaked open. A small, gloved hand emerged, followed by the hem of a dusty blue traveling dress. The woman who stepped out remained still for a moment, her face hidden by a modest bonnet. When she finally lifted her gaze, Thalorin's prepared greeting faded away. Her face was streaked with tears, her blue eyes red, swollen, and rimmed. She clutched a small valise to her chest like a barrier, her shoulders visibly shaking even under her heavy traveling cloak. "Miss Stonecarver." Thalorin approached, removing his hat. She nodded once, her lips pressed together as if struggling to maintain control. "I'm Thalorin Montclair," he said, extending his hand, which she accepted hesitantly. "Welcome to Willow Creek." Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. She swiftly wiped them away with a handkerchief already damp from earlier use. "I'm sorry, Mr. Montclair," she whispered, her voice faltering. "This isn't how I envisioned our first encounter." Around them, the station buzzed with activity as passengers disembarked and luggage was unloaded. A few inquisitive onlookers had paused to observe the uncomfortable scene. Thalorin gently led her away from the curious gazes toward the small bench at the end of the platform. Once seated, he reached into his pocket and offered her a fresh handkerchief. "You don't have to hide your feelings from me," he said softly. "Whatever is bothering you, Miss Stonecarver, I imagine you've had ample time to reflect on it during your journey. No need to force a smile for my sake." Her eyes widened slightly, and she accepted his handkerchief with a trembling hand. "You're very understanding, sir," she said. "I fear I may have made a grave error." Thalorin felt a knot form in his stomach. He had heard stories of mail-order brides taking one look at their prospective husbands and fleeing on the next eastbound coach. He wasn't one to boast, but he was aware that his appearance was quite respectable. At 31, he stood tall and broad-shouldered. His face, though weathered by the elements, had always been deemed handsome by his mother. "Am I not what you expected?" he inquired bluntly. "No, it's not you," she interjected, her surprise seeming genuine. She glanced around nervously. "Might we discuss this in a more private setting?" Thalorin agreed, retrieving her trunk from the stagecoach and loading it onto his wagon. He assisted her onto the wooden seat, then took his place beside her, urging the horses forward with a gentle flick of the reins. "My home is roughly 4 miles outside of town," he informed her. "We can talk freely there, or I can take you to the hotel if you prefer." Aeloria gripped her valise tightly. "Your home would be best, I think." They journeyed in silence through the modest town of Willow Creek, which consisted of a general store, blacksmith, saloon, small church, and a few other establishments lining the dusty main street. Thalorin observed Aeloria taking in the sights with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Once they had left the town behind, following the winding road that cut through the golden prairie grass, she finally broke the silence. "I deceived you, Mr. Montclair." Thalorin kept his gaze fixed on the road, his expression neutral despite the unease stirring in his chest. "About what, precisely?" he asked. "In my letters," she continued, her voice gaining a semblance of steadiness, "I wasn't entirely truthful about my circumstances." The wagon hit a rut, causing them both to jolt. Thalorin steadied her with a hand on her arm, then quickly withdrew it. "I'm listening," he said. Aeloria took a deep breath. "I told you I was a schoolteacher in Boston." "That part is true, but I didn't leave my position of my own accord." Her fingers fidgeted with the handkerchief he had given her. "The headmaster's son developed an infatuation with me. When I rebuffed his advances, he grew enraged. He accused me of inappropriate behavior, and his father believed him." Thalorin's jaw clenched. "And so your reputation was tarnished overnight. No respectable school would hire you after that. You couldn't find work anywhere in Boston." A bitter smile crossed her lips. "A ruined woman has few options." They reached the top of a small hill, and Thalorin's ranch came into view. A modest, two-story house with a wide porch, surrounded by outbuildings and a corral. In the distance, cattle grazed across the rolling landscape. "So you responded to my advertisement?" Thalorin asked. "Yes, but I didn't disclose the scandal. I feared you wouldn't consider me if you knew." She looked at him directly, her tear-streaked face solemn. "I understand if you wish to end our arrangement. I can return to town and take the next coach eastward." Thalorin slowed the wagon as they approached the ranch. "Miss Stonecarver, may I speak candidly?" She nodded. "I'm not one for games or deceit. Out here, a person is judged by their actions more than by rumors. What truly concerns me is whether you were sincere about desiring a genuine partnership, about being ready to collaborate with me to create something meaningful." He motioned towards the sprawling ranch. "This land represents my life's dedication. It might not measure up to the grandeur of Boston's high society, but it's mine. I placed an advertisement for a wife because I'm weary of confronting its challenges alone." The wagon came to a halt in front of the house. In the yard, a dog barked eagerly, rushing over to welcome them. "That's Redmayne," Thalorin said, his voice tinged with affection. "He's quite friendly, just overly enthusiastic." Aeloria watched the dog circle the wagon, her expression gently softening. "Mr. Montclair," she said, turning back to him, "I might have left out certain details from my past, but I was truthful about seeking a new beginning and being prepared to work diligently. I have never avoided hardship." She squared her shoulders. "If you're still inclined to uphold our agreement, I assure you that you won't find me lacking in commitment or effort." Thalorin scrutinized her for a prolonged moment. Beneath the tear-streaked face and fear, he discerned resolve in the firmness of her jaw, the steadiness returning to her eyes. "Let's get you settled in," he said at last, descending from the wagon. "You've endured a lengthy journey. We can discuss the future after you've had a chance to rest." He assisted her down, noting how delicate her hand felt in his, how light she was as he lowered her to the ground. Redmayne bounded up, and Aeloria cautiously extended her hand for the dog to sniff. "Hello, Redmayne," she whispered. The dog wagged his tail, apparently approving of the newcomer. Thalorin carried her trunk to the house, pushing open the front door. "It's not extravagant," he cautioned, suddenly viewing his home through a stranger's perspective. The furniture was sturdy but unadorned, the layout practical. He'd spent the past week cleaning until every surface gleamed, but it remained unmistakably a bachelor's residence. Aeloria stepped inside, removing her bonnet. For the first time, Thalorin saw her clearly, her honey blonde hair pinned in a practical style, her features delicate yet strong, with those striking blue eyes that, despite the redness from crying, held an intelligence that matched her letters. "It's lovely," she said softly, her gaze taking in the large stone fireplace, the bookshelves filled with volumes, the windows that let in the late afternoon light. "Did you build it yourself?" she asked. "Most of it," Thalorin acknowledged. "I had help with the framework and chimney." He gestured toward the stairs. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right. I've prepared it for you, but if there's anything you need changed, just let me know." She looked at him questioningly. "We're not married yet, Miss Stonecarver," he explained. "The preacher comes through town every other Sunday. He'll be here this weekend." If he left the sentence unfinished, a wave of relief visibly washed over her face. "Thank you, Mr. Montclair. That's very thoughtful." Thalorin carried her trunk upstairs, placing it in the bedroom he'd spent weeks preparing. He acquired a new quilt from the general store, draped freshly sewn curtains that his neighbor, Mrs. Cailorn, had assisted him with, and set a small vase filled with wildflowers on the dresser. Upon descending the stairs, he discovered Aeloria gazing out the window at the ranch. Redmayne had made himself comfortable at her feet, as if they had been acquainted for years. "I must attend to the evening tasks," Thalorin announced. "The kitchen is well stocked, but you shouldn't feel compelled to cook tonight if you're exhausted. There's leftover stew from yesterday." She turned away from the window. "I'll prepare supper, Mr. Montclair. It's the least I can do after your kindness." Thalorin nodded and made his way to the door, then hesitated. "Miss Stonecarver." "Yes?" "Whatever transpired in Boston, it remains in Boston. Out here, you have the freedom to define who you are." A genuine smile graced her lips for the first time. "Thank you." As Thalorin stepped outside and headed toward the barn, he pondered what he had gotten himself into. A mail-order bride with a tarnished reputation was not what he had anticipated. But then, he suspected his ranch was not what she had expected either. He resolved to give her a week, a single week, to see if they could build something authentic from this unanticipated start. Aeloria remained motionless in the kitchen long after Thalorin had left. Her hands shook as she removed her hat and discarded her travel-worn gloves. The kitchen was remarkably well organized for a bachelor's home, with pots hanging neatly and dishes stacked in an orderly manner. A wood-burning stove that appeared recently used stood in the corner. She approached the water pump at the sink, working the handle until cool water flowed. Splashing her face, she attempted to wash away the traces of her tears. How humiliating to arrive in such a state, confirming every cliché of the emotional woman. Yet Mr. Montclair's response had been surprising. No demands, no immediate rejection of her confession, just that steady gaze and the simple offer. "You don't have to pretend with me." Could she trust such generosity? Her experiences had taught her that men's kindness often came with strings attached. She explored the house while gathering ingredients for supper. The parlor featured a cozy armchair positioned near the bookshelves, which held an impressive collection for a frontier rancher: history, poetry, even some novels. A desk in the corner held papers neatly arranged, indicating that Mr. Montclair maintained meticulous records of his business. Upstairs, she returned to her bedroom to change into a fresh dress. The room was larger than she had expected, simply furnished but comfortable, with a window offering a view of the western range. The wildflowers were a particularly considerate touch. As she unpacked her modest belongings, Aeloria wondered what Thalorin Montclair truly sought in a wife. His advertisement had been clear: a rancher in search of a practical, hard-working woman for marriage. An established but expanding property, with companionship and partnership offered in return for the same. No empty assurances or sentimental words. By the time Thalorin stepped back into the house, Aeloria had readied a modest yet satisfying dinner of salted pork, beans, and biscuits. She had unearthed a jar of preserves tucked away in the pantry and placed it on the table next to the butter she had found in the spring house. He came in, taking off his hat and hanging it on a hook by the door. The aroma of the food caused him to halt, a look of delighted surprise spreading across his features. "You shouldn't have gone through all this effort," he remarked, cleaning his hands at the basin she had set out. "It was no effort at all. I find cooking enjoyable." Aeloria motioned towards the table. "Please have a seat." They initially ate in an uncomfortable silence until Thalorin inquired about her westward journey. Slowly their conversation began to flow more easily as they talked about the shifting scenery she had seen through the train and stagecoach windows, the peculiar spring weather Wyoming had endured. The ranch now has 60 head of cattle, Thalorin shared as they finished their meal. He had started with just 12, aiming to double the herd within the next 2 years. "That's quite an achievement," Aeloria said genuinely. "You've managed to do so much on your own," Thalorin shrugged. "I've had help from neighbors when necessary. That's how things work out here. Everyone lends a hand." He paused. "On the topic of neighbors, the Kaylorns have extended an invitation for us to join them for Sunday dinner after church. Silvara is keen to make your acquaintance. I told her we would attend, but if you're not at ease with the idea, we won't." "That sounds wonderful," Aeloria interjected, though the prospect of encountering strangers caused her stomach to knot. "Are there many families in the vicinity? Not what one would consider nearby by Eastern standards?" "The Brennans are the closest, about 3 miles to the east. The Thompson place is 5 miles to the north. The towns are expanding, though, with new families arriving every month." He gazed at her from across the table. "It can be quite lonely out here. That's something to keep in mind." The implication was evident. This was her opportunity to reconsider before any formal commitment. "I am familiar with loneliness, Mr. Montclair," she replied softly. "In some ways, it seems more appealing than being surrounded by people who pass judgment without understanding." He nodded, appearing to accept this. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said, standing up from the table. He retreated into the parlor, returning with a folded paper that he placed before her. It was a deed to the ranch, bearing his name and a blank space where hers would be. "If we marry," he explained, "half of everything becomes yours. I had the lawyer prepare it last month. I want my wife to be a genuine partner, not just a housekeeper who toils without a stake in what we build." Aeloria stared at the document, unable to speak. In Boston, married women held no legal claim to property. Here, this near stranger was offering her a security that even women in the highest society could rarely attain. "Why would you do this?" she finally asked. Thalorin's expression remained grave. "Because ranching is demanding. The days are long. The winters are harsh. If anyone is to confront that peril with me, they are entitled to an equal share of the spoils." He snatched the paper back. "Reflect on it. There's no rush to decide tonight." After the meal, Thalorin took it upon himself to wash the dishes, with Aeloria handling the drying. The shared chore felt unexpectedly intimate. When their fingers brushed as they exchanged a plate, Aeloria felt a flush creep across her cheeks. "I believe I should turn in," she declared once they had finished. "It's been an exhausting day," Thalorin agreed. "Breakfast is typically at sunrise, but sleep as long as you require tomorrow. You've journeyed a great distance." Upstairs in her chamber, Aeloria perched on the edge of the bed, her mind racing with the day's occurrences. Beyond her window, the expansive Wyoming sky was ablaze with more stars than she had ever witnessed in Boston. The quiet was overwhelming. No clattering of carriages on cobblestones. No murmurs of neighbors through thin walls. Just the rustling of wind through the grass, the distant lowing of cattle. And somewhere within the house below, the steady footsteps of the stranger who might become her husband. The morning arrived with golden rays filtering through the curtains Aeloria had neglected to close. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't recall her whereabouts. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up abruptly, startled to see the sun already high in the sky. She quickly dressed in a practical brown work dress, pinned up her hair, and hurried downstairs, anticipating Thalorin's impatient presence. Instead, the house was deserted except for Redmayne, who wagged his tail in greeting. On the kitchen table, she discovered a note penned in an unexpectedly elegant script. "Miss Stonecarver has gone to inspect the north pasture. Expect her return by mid-morning. Coffee is on the stove, and there's bread and preserves for breakfast. Rest well. C.M." Relieved that she hadn't caused offense with her tardiness on her first morning, Aeloria poured herself a cup of coffee and stepped onto the front porch. The daylight view was stunning, rolling grasslands stretching toward distant mountains, cattle grazing peacefully in the nearest pasture. The ranch buildings were more extensive than she had realized in yesterday's fading light. Beyond the barn, she could see a chicken coop, a smokehouse, and what appeared to be the foundation of a new structure. After finishing her coffee, Aeloria decided to be productive. She went back inside and took stock of the kitchen, compiling a list of supplies they might need from town. Then she rolled up her sleeves and began a meticulous cleaning of the already orderly house. By mid-morning, she had swept every floor, dusted every surface, and was kneading dough for fresh bread when she heard the sound of an approaching horse. Through the window, she watched Thalorin dismount with a fluid, graceful motion that hinted at years of riding. He removed his hat, wiped his brow, and led the horse to the barn. Aeloria quickly checked her reflection in the small mirror by the door, smoothing stray strands of hair and brushing flour from her cheek. She couldn't quite grasp why she was bothered about her appearance after spending the morning tidying up. As Thalorin stepped inside, the aroma of freshly baked goods wafted through the air. His eyes flickered with surprise at the sight before him. Every surface gleamed, the shelves were neatly arranged, and a bowl of rising dough sat by the stove. "You've been quite industrious," he remarked, placing his hat on its hook. "I trust you don't object," Aeloria responded. "I wanted it to be practical, truly. It hasn't looked this good since my mother's last visit 3 years ago." He fell silent for a moment before softly adding, "Since my mother visited 3 years ago." There was a peculiar note in his voice that gave Aeloria pause. "Are your parents still living in the East?" she inquired. Thalorin shook his head. "They're both gone. Father passed shortly after the war, and mother in 70. "I'm truly sorry to hear that," she said genuinely. He nodded in acknowledgement. "And your family?" "Your letters mentioned parents in Boston. Aeloria's hands remained on the dough. My father is a merchant, and my mother handles their social engagements. I have 2 younger sisters. She hesitated briefly. They don't know I've journeyed west to marry. They believe I've accepted a teaching position in Chicago. Thalorin's eyebrows lifted in surprise. You didn't inform them? They wouldn't have comprehended, she explained. After the scandal, their primary concern was the impact on their social standing. My father suggested I retreat to his cousin's home in Maine to avoid the gossip, as if one could simply hide for years until people forgot. But coming west as a mail-order bride seemed like a better alternative. It offered a fresh start, she stated simply, and a measure of independence, even if that independence comes through marriage. Something in Thalorin's expression gentled. Well, I'm glad you're here, even if your reasons weren't what I anticipated. And what did you anticipate, Mr. Montclair? The question escaped her lips before she could reconsider. He leaned against the doorframe, pondering. Honestly, I thought you might be fleeing poverty, or perhaps seeking adventure, or maybe just practical enough to see that a business arrangement between compatible people could blossom into something meaningful. And now, knowing what you know about me, I believe you're braver than most men I've encountered, he said softly. It takes courage to leave behind everything familiar, especially when doing so alone. The sincere compliment, offered without artifice, warmed something within Aeloria's chest. She looked away, suddenly flustered. I should finish this bread, she murmured. And I should give you a tour of the ranch, Thalorin replied. When you're ready, that is. A woman should know what she's potentially committing to. An hour later, they strolled together across the property. Redmayne bounded ahead through the tall grass. Thalorin indicated the boundaries of his land, discussed his plans for expansion, and showed her the spring that supplied their water. The creek never runs dry, even in the driest years, he explained. That's why this land was worth the gamble. How long have you been here? Aeloria asked, trying to match his long strides. 5 years. After the war, I ventured west with the modest savings I had managed to accumulate. I toiled on various ranches until I could finally afford to purchase this land. He motioned towards an unfinished building near the barn, which would eventually become a more spacious smokehouse. The expanding herds required additional room for processing. Aeloria observed the enthusiasm that illuminated his features as he spoke about his aspirations for the ranch. This place was more than just property to him. It was a dream taking shape. What you've accomplished here is truly remarkable, she remarked genuinely. Thalorin glanced at her, as if trying to assess the sincerity of her words. This isn't the kind of life most women would choose. Well, perhaps I'm not like most women, she replied. A faint smile began to form on his lips, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. It softened his stern expression, revealing a dimple on his right cheek. No, Miss Stonecarver, I don't believe you are. They carried on, walking side by side. The expansive landscape made Aeloria feel both insignificant and strangely liberated. There were no confining buildings, no prying eyes watching from windows. Please, call me Aeloria, she said abruptly. If we are considering marriage, Miss Stonecarver seems too formal. Thalorin nodded. Aeloria, then, and I'm Thalorin. At the corral, he introduced her to the horses. His own chestnut gelding named Buck, a dappled mare called Penny, and a gentle palomino. This one is yours if you choose to stay, he said as the palomino gently nudged Aeloria's shoulder. Her name's Meadowlark, She's even-tempered and suitable for someone who hasn't ridden much. Aeloria gently stroked the horse's soft nose. What makes you think I haven't ridden much? Thalorin looked taken aback. Have you? Indeed I have. My grandfather owned a farm outside Boston. I spent my summers there as a child. I may not be a cowgirl, but I can certainly stay on a horse. She smiled, recalling the memories. Grandfather always said I had a natural seat. For a moment, Thalorin simply stared at her, his expression inscrutable. Then he laughed, a rich, warm sound that Aeloria found herself wanting to hear again. I stand corrected, he said. It seems there's more to you than meets the eye, Aeloria Stonecarver. I could say the same about you, Thalorin Montclair. Their eyes met, and a moment of genuine connection passed between them, surprising them both. Thalorin cleared his throat and looked away first. We should head back, he said. Storms are brewing in the western sky. Sure enough, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. By the time they reached the house, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of rain. They spent the afternoon indoors as the storm rolled through. Thalorin showed Aeloria his account books, explaining the ranch's finances with an unexpected openness. She was impressed by his meticulous record-keeping and the careful way he had built his operation without falling into debt. Most ranchers borrow heavily, he explained. One bad winter can ruin them. I'd rather grow slowly but surely. That's sensible, Aeloria agreed, though I imagine it requires a great deal of patience. He confessed that there was a skill he had to acquire, one that didn't come naturally to him. As the sky lit up with flashes of lightning, Thalorin started a fire in the fireplace. The dancing flames and the pounding rain outside created a warm and inviting atmosphere, making it easier for them to talk. Aeloria ended up sharing tales from her time as a teacher, the student she had grown fond of, and the fulfillment she found in nurturing young minds. You must miss it, Thalorin noted. Teaching, she replied. Indeed I do, but that part of my life is over. Not necessarily, he countered thoughtfully. Willow Creek is expanding rapidly. There's talk of constructing a proper schoolhouse next year. They'll be in need of a teacher. Aeloria's eyes widened in surprise. You wouldn't object if your wife pursued a career outside the home, she stated, more than act. Thalorin simply shrugged. The ranch requires attention, of course. But winters are long, and if teaching brings you happiness. He let the sentence trail off. That evening, they prepared dinner together, growing more comfortable with each other's company as they moved around the kitchen. During the meal, Thalorin described the rhythm of ranch life throughout the seasons, from spring calving to summer grazing, fall roundup, and winter upkeep. It's not easy, he cautioned, but there's a sense of accomplishment in it. I'm not afraid of hard work, Aeloria assured him, though I must admit I've never actually milked a cow before. We have just one milk cow, Thalorin said with a smile. Old Lyra. She's as gentle as can be. I can show you how to milk her tomorrow, if you'd like. I would, Aeloria said, realizing she genuinely meant it. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the rain, Aeloria pondered the unexpected direction her life had taken. Just 2 days prior, she had been crying on a stagecoach, convinced she had made a terrible mistake. Now, she was contemplating a future that, though uncertain, held real promise. Thalorin Montclair was not at all what she had envisioned from his letters. The stern, practical rancher had layers she hadn't anticipated. Intelligence, thoughtfulness, and a quiet strength that comforted her rather than intimidated. It wasn't love, of course. Such feelings couldn't blossom in a single day, but it was a start, a foundation on which something genuine might grow. The following morning, the sky was clear and crisp after the storm. Aeloria woke up early, determined to have breakfast ready before Thalorin started his chores. However, she found him already in the kitchen, with coffee brewing on the stove. "Good morning," he said, looking up from the letter he was writing. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well, thank you," she replied, gesturing to his paper. "It's a list for the general store. I thought we might ride into town today. If you're agreeable, you can meet some people and pick up supplies." The idea of meeting the townsfolk made Aeloria anxious, but she understood the importance. "Of course. What time were you thinking?" "After the morning chores. There's a dress shop that Silvara Kalorn recommended." Aeloria considered the suggestion, noting her simple brown dress, one of the few she had brought. None seemed fitting for a church wedding. "That's kind of you," she acknowledged. Thalorin folded the list and slipped it into his pocket. "I also wanted to talk about the wedding. Preacher Pendragon will be here Sunday, if you're still set on it." He paused, his face unreadable. Aeloria inhaled deeply. "I'd like to go ahead as planned, if you're still agreeable." Thalorin's face lit up briefly before he composed himself. "I am." "Then Sunday it is," she confirmed, surprised by her own resolve. After breakfast, Thalorin followed through on his offer to teach Aeloria how to milk Lyra. They headed to the small barn, where the gentle brown cow greeted them with a soft moo. "She's gentle," Thalorin reassured Aeloria, patting the cow's side. "Just approach her calmly." He showed her the technique, then guided her hands, demonstrating the correct grip and rhythm. His rough hands were gentle over hers, his voice patient as he explained. The unexpected closeness of the moment, his chest nearly against her back, his breath warm near her ear, made Aeloria keenly aware of him as a man, not just a future husband. "You're a quick learner," he praised as milk flowed into the pail. "I had a good instructor," she replied, glancing back to find his face closer than she expected. Their eyes met, and Thalorin held her gaze a moment longer before stepping away. "I'll prepare the horses," he said, his voice slightly rough. "We should reach town before noon." The journey to Willow Creek took just under an hour. Aeloria appreciated the chance to showcase her riding skills, and Thalorin seemed impressed by her confident seat and easy handling of Meadowlark. "You weren't exaggerating your riding abilities," he commented as they neared the town. "I don't often exaggerate," Aeloria replied, "though it's been years since I've ridden regularly." "You'll have plenty of chances now," Thalorin said. "Can't run a ranch without horseback riding." Willow Creek appeared more inviting in the daylight than it had during Aeloria's emotional arrival. The main street featured several new buildings alongside the original ones, indicating a thriving town. People nodded greetings to Thalorin as they passed, their curious glances taking in Aeloria. They secured their horses outside the general store, and Thalorin offered his arm as they entered. The owner, a balding man with glasses, looked up from his ledger. "Montclair mentioned your bride had arrived." His gaze shifted to Aeloria. "Madam, welcome to Willow Creek." "Thank you, Mr. Peregrinson," Aeloria responded, shaking his outstretched hand. "My wife has been eager to meet you. New faces are always welcome, especially ladies. The town has too many single men for comfort." Thalorin presented his list, explaining that Al and Miss Stonecarver would be choosing some fabric and notions. Peregrinson nodded enthusiastically, directing them toward the rear of the store. He mentioned that the fabric section had recently been enlarged, thanks to Mary Garretson's order of new patterns from the eastern states. As Aeloria examined the fabric selection, a jovial, round-faced woman approached her. She introduced herself as Beatrix Peregrinson and remarked, "So you're Thalorin Montclair's mail-order bride. He's certainly found himself a lovely one." The woman's candid appraisal was delivered with such amiable warmth that Aeloria couldn't be offended. "We're all delighted he's finally settling down. We've been worried about that boy all alone out there." Aeloria, genuinely curious, asked, "You've known Mr. Montclair for a while?" "Since he first arrived in the territory," Beatrix replied. "He's a quiet type, but as reliable as the sunrise. He helped build half the buildings in town without ever asking for payment. Just the kind of neighbor you want in a place like this." Beatrix leaned in conspiratorially. "He broke half the single girls' hearts when he sent east for a bride instead of courting locally." This was surprising to Aeloria. "There were women interested in him?" "Honey, a man like that, hard-working, honest, with his own land and not bad to look at. They were practically drawing lots for the chance. But he never seemed to notice, too focused on that ranch of his." This revelation gave Aeloria pause. Thalorin could have had his pick of local women, yet he'd chosen to advertise for a mail-order bride. Why? After selecting a beautiful blue fabric for a wedding dress and arranging for the seamstress to fit her that afternoon, Aeloria rejoined Thalorin at the front of the store. "Was everything to your liking?" he inquired. "Indeed. Mrs. Peregrinson has been most helpful." Thalorin nodded, appearing slightly uneasy. "I need to consult with the blacksmith about some repairs. Would you mind if I left you with the seamstress for an hour?" Aeloria assured him that she had plenty to keep her occupied. After agreeing to meet at the small cafe for lunch, they went their separate ways. The seamstress, a sharp-eyed Frenchwoman named Madame Ironright, tisked at the rushed timeline, but promised a simple yet elegant wedding dress by Saturday. "For Mr. Montclair, I make an exception," she declared, pins in her mouth as she measured Aeloria. "Good man, deserves a beautiful bride." By the time Aeloria met Thalorin for lunch, she'd heard similar praise from half a dozen townspeople. Everyone spoke highly of him, his work ethic, his fairness, and his willingness to assist neighbors. It painted a portrait of a man deeply respected in his community. At the cafe, a cozy spot with checked tablecloths and enticing aromas, Thalorin pulled out Aeloria's chair. "How was your morning?" he asked once they were seated. "Enlightening," she replied honestly. "Your neighbors hold you in high regard." A blush spread across his tanned cheeks. In small towns, everyone is privy to each other's affairs. They appear to be decent folks, and for the most part, they are. He paused, perhaps overwhelmed by the sudden influx of acquaintances. Aeloria pondered this for a moment, but she found them to be quite hospitable. That was reassuring. He seemed to relax, his earlier tension easing. "I had been worried. Given what you had shared about Boston, I feared I might encounter similar prejudice here." Aeloria shook her head dismissively. "No one here is aware of my past, Thalorin." And judging by Mrs. Peregrinson's words, they seemed more interested in embracing a new neighbor than in delving into her history. Their discussion was cut short by the arrival of the cafe proprietor, a sturdy woman who identified herself as Aeloria Parker. "It's about time you introduced your bride to us properly, Thalorin Montclair," she chided playfully. "We were starting to think you were keeping her hidden away." "Miss Stonecarver has only been here for 2 days," Thalorin reminded her gently, his tone hinting at a long-standing familiarity with the woman's straightforward demeanor. "Well, she's here now, and even more beautiful than the rumors suggested." Aeloria turned to Aeloria. You must join our Ladies' Aid Society, dear. We meet every Thursday at the church. It's nothing formal, just sewing and more gossip than is likely appropriate. I'd be honored, Aeloria responded, genuinely moved by the invitation. After a hearty lunch consisting of beef stew and fresh bread, they resumed their errands around town. Thalorin introduced Aeloria to the banker, the preacher's wife, and several other notable residents. By mid-afternoon, she had received more warm greetings and invitations than she had in her entire last year in Boston. Their last stop was the small church where they were to be married. It was a modest, white building with a humble steeple, encircled by a picket fence. Not as impressive as the churches in Boston, Thalorin remarked as they stood before it. It's perfect, Aeloria replied, and she meant it. The journey back to the ranch was pleasant, both of them satisfied with the day's events. As they reached the crest of the hill overlooking the property, Thalorin reined in his horse. What's the matter? Aeloria asked, pulling up beside him. He gestured towards the house and the surrounding land, bathed in the warm glow of the late afternoon sun. I wanted you to see it like this. Your home? If you still wish it to be. Aeloria took in the scene, the solid house, the well-kept outbuildings, the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. It wasn't opulent or lavish, but there was a certain charm in its simplicity, its purpose. I do choose it, she said softly, and I'm thankful for the choice. Thalorin turned to look at her, his expression grave. Aeloria, before Sunday arrives, there's something I need to tell you. What is it? She waited, her curiosity piqued after Beatrix Peregrinson's comments. I want you to understand why I sought a mail-order bride instead of courting locally, he began. I was engaged before the war, he continued. Lyra was from my hometown in Pennsylvania. We had planned to marry upon my return. His voice drifted, lost in the past. I returned a different person. We all did. Lyra she attempted to comprehend, but she couldn't grasp what I'd witnessed, what I'd done. She ended our engagement, Aeloria guessed with kindness. Thalorin simply nodded, explaining that she wanted the man who had left, not the one who had returned. I couldn't fault her for that. He took a deep breath. After that, I couldn't stand the idea of courting or trying to explain myself to someone who expected a different man. Heading west was a chance for a new beginning. But you still desired a family, Aeloria remarked, realization dawning. A partnership, he corrected. Someone who would accept me as I am now, not comparing me to who I was before. That's why my advertisement was so straightforward. No romantic illusions, just honest conditions. I arrived in tears, completely opposite to what you'd asked for, Aeloria said, with a small, self-deprecating smile. To her astonishment, Thalorin laughed. You certainly weren't what I expected, he admitted. His expression softened, but perhaps that's for the best. They continued down the hill toward home, something new blossoming between them. Perhaps it was understanding, or the beginnings of trust. The following day was a whirlwind of preparations for both the wedding and Sunday dinner at the Brennans. Aeloria baked pies to bring as their contribution, while Thalorin finished repairs on the smokehouse and cleared away the last of the storm debris. By Saturday evening, Madame Ironright had delivered the wedding dress, a simple yet elegant creation in cornflower blue that complemented Aeloria's eyes. Thalorin made himself scarce as she tried it on, declaring it bad luck to see the bride in her dress before the wedding. Not that I'm superstitious, he added quickly. Just traditional in some ways. That night, At last, as unmarried individuals under the same roof, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Redmayne lay at their feet, occasionally thumping his tail when one of them reached down to scratch his ears. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Thalorin asked, breaking a comfortable silence. "A little," Aeloria admitted, "though not for the reasons you might think." "Oh, I'm not nervous about marrying you," she clarified. "I'm nervous about meeting so many new people at once, being the center of attention." Thalorin nodded, understanding. "We could have had a private ceremony," he said. "No, this is better. Starting our marriage as part of the community." She turned to face him. "Are you nervous?" she asked. He considered this seriously. "Yes, but not about the ceremony," he replied. His hands rested on his knees, strong and capable. "I'm nervous about being a good husband. It's not a role I've prepared for." The simple honesty of his confession touched Aeloria deeply. "I think perhaps no one is truly prepared for marriage," she said. "We can only promise to try our best and be patient with each other's mistakes." Thalorin's eyes met hers, warm in the fading light. "That seems like a solid foundation," he agreed. Later, as Aeloria prepared for bed, she thought about the unusual path that had led her to this moment. 3 weeks prior, she had been a disgraced educator with limited opportunities. The following day, she would become Mrs. Thalorin Montclair, a rancher's wife, with a residence and a community that already felt more inviting than Boston had in years. It wasn't the future she had envisioned for herself, but as she stood on the brink of it, she discovered an unexpected sense of optimism. The Sunday morning sky was clear and mild, ideal conditions for a wedding. Aeloria stirred early, too anxious to sleep in. She washed her hair and styled it in an elegant updo, securing it with the pearl-tipped pins that had belonged to her grandmother. Slipping into her new blue gown, she examined her reflection in the small mirror. The woman staring back at her seemed different from the tearful, frightened individual who had disembarked from the stagecoach 3 days earlier. There was a rosy hue in her cheeks, a sparkle in her eyes that had been absent for months. A gentle tap at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Aeloria?" Thalorin's voice filtered through the wood. "Are you ready? We should depart soon if we aim to arrive at the service on time." "Just a moment," she replied, making a final adjustment to her hair. When she opened the door, she found Thalorin standing there in his finest suit, a dark wool, expertly tailored, with a crisp white shirt and a string tie. He had trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, transitioning from a rugged rancher to a distinguished gentleman. His eyes widened as he took in her appearance. "You look stunning," he said simply. "Thank you," Aeloria responded, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. "You look quite dashing yourself." Thalorin cleared his throat, appearing flustered by the compliment. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He retrieved a small velvet pouch. "It belonged to my mother." "I'd like you to have it, if you're willing." Aeloria accepted the pouch, opening it carefully. Inside was a delicate gold band adorned with a small, perfect diamond. "Thalorin," she breathed. "It's beautiful. If you prefer something else—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "It's perfect. I'm honored to wear your mother's ring." Relief washed over his features. "Good. That's good." The church was nearly filled to capacity when they arrived. News of Thalorin Montclair's wedding had spread throughout the community, drawing people from neighboring ranches and farms. Aeloria felt a moment of panic at the sea of unfamiliar faces, but Thalorin's steady presence beside her kept her anchored. Preacher Pendragon, a tall man with kind eyes and a booming voice, greeted them warmly. The ceremony itself was simple, yet meaningful. With traditional vows exchanged in clear voices, the ring slid onto Aeloria's finger with hands that trembled only slightly. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "Mr. Montclair, you may kiss your bride." Thalorin gazed into Aeloria's eyes, a question in his expression. She gave a small nod, and he leaned forward, pressing his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief but tender, a promise rather than a display of passion. As they turned to face the gathered crowd as newlyweds, Aeloria was taken aback by the heartfelt applause that welcomed them. These individuals, who had been mere strangers just days prior, appeared genuinely delighted by their union. The Caelorn family's Sunday dinner was a vibrant gathering. Silvara Caelorn, a warm and maternal woman in her 50s, welcomed Aeloria as if they were reunited kin rather than recent acquaintances. "We're overjoyed that Thalorin has finally found someone special," she confided in Aeloria as they began to serve the meal. "That man needed a steadfast partner in his life. I sincerely hope I can be that for him," Aeloria admitted candidly. Silvara gently squeezed her hand. "You already are, dear. I haven't witnessed him smile so freely since he arrived in this region." The dinner conversation unfolded effortlessly, with Eldrin Caelorn sharing tales from the early days of the settlement. Their children, 2 grown sons with families of their own, and a 17-year-old daughter, added their own anecdotes, particularly about Thalorin's assistance during trying times. "Saved our entire herd during the blizzard of 71, the eldest son recounted. Ventured out in conditions that would have claimed most men." Aeloria stole a glance at Thalorin, who seemed uncomfortable with the accolades. "Anyone in my position would have done the same," he murmured softly. "No, they wouldn't have?" Eldrin insisted. "That's precisely why we're all so glad to see you settled with a wonderful woman. A man who gives so much deserves happiness in return." By the time they departed, officially home now for both of them, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting the grasslands in hues of gold and amber. They rode side by side, content in their shared silence. At the ranch, Thalorin dismounted first, then assisted Aeloria from her horse. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, his eyes locking with hers in a silent inquiry. "Well, Mrs. Montclair," he murmured softly, "welcome to our home." The sound of her new name sent a shiver of excitement through Aeloria. "Thank you, Mr. Montclair." And before she could step toward the house, Thalorin startled her by lifting her into his arms. "It's tradition," he explained, carrying her over the threshold. Inside, he carefully set her down, his hands remaining at her waist. The house felt different. No longer solely his, but theirs together. "Aeloria," he began, his voice grave, "I want you to understand that I don't. That is, I don't anticipate." She gently pressed a finger to his lips, halting his stumbling words. "I understand," she said softly, "but I am your wife now, in name and in law. I would be your wife in truth as well, if you desire it." Thalorin's eyes darkened with intensity. "Are you sure? We've known each other for only a few days." "Some people marry without ever meeting," she reminded him. "At least we've had time to converse and begin to understand one another." He raised a hand to caress her cheek. "I want this to be right for you." "It already is," she assured him. His kiss was different this time, still tender but with a fervor that made Aeloria's heart pound. After they finally parted ways, both were breathing more rapidly. "I ought to tend to the animals," Thalorin remarked hesitantly. "Evening tasks. I'll be here when you return," Aeloria vowed. Later, in the darkness of their now shared bedroom, they united as husband and wife. Thalorin was gentle, patient, his touch soft as he navigated unfamiliar terrain. For Aeloria, the encounter was an epiphany. Unlike the discomfort and obligation she'd been cautioned about by her married acquaintances, but a delightful revelation of bond and enjoyment. Following that, nestled in Thalorin's embrace, Aeloria experienced a tranquility she had believed vanished forever in the uproar that had expelled her from Boston. "Content," Thalorin whispered into her hair. "Indeed," she replied honestly. "And you?" His arms enveloped her more tightly, more so than I had anticipated being again. The days that followed their nuptials established a new cadence to their shared life. Thalorin instructed Aeloria in the daily management of the ranch, how to nourish the chickens and gather eggs, care for the vegetable patch, and transform Lyra's milk into butter. She demonstrated a swift aptitude, tackling each duty with resolve and acumen. In the evenings, they would repose on the veranda or by the hearth, exchanging the day's occurrences. Occasionally, they would read aloud from Thalorin's assortment of tomes, poetry, history, even newspaper reports from the East. Other times, they merely conversed, exploring the landscapes of each other's lives and thoughts. By night, they delved deeper into each other's company, their physical bond intensifying as their ease with one another grew. Aeloria uncovered an unanticipated delight in the closeness they shared, and Thalorin appeared equally astonished by the profundity of their link. 2 weeks post-wedding, a missive arrived from Boston, a response from Aeloria's younger sister to her previous letter. Thalorin encountered her on the porch after perusing it, tears in her eyes. "Unpleasant tidings?" he inquired, taking a seat beside her. "My sister's betrothal has been announced," Aeloria disclosed, dabbing away tears. "To the scion of a distinguished family, the wedding will occur in the spring. You're sorrowful you won't be present," Thalorin noted. "Indeed." She meticulously folded the letter. "But that's not the reason for my tears. She relates that my disgrace has been largely overlooked already. A fresh scandal has seized Boston's fascination. A financier fleeing with clients' funds. Isn't that favorable news? I suppose." Aeloria gazed out over the prairie. "But it renders it all so futile. My standing, my vocation, my entire existence, they're shattered over whispers that society has already discarded for newer gossip." Thalorin grasped her hand. "Not futile. It led you here." The straightforward declaration altered her viewpoint. Had she not been compelled to depart Boston, she would never have answered Thalorin's advertisement, never encountered this new life that was blossoming with unanticipated abundance. "You're correct," she conceded, "and I'm thankful for that at the very least." As the summer months transitioned into fall, Aeloria became an integral part of both the ranch and the broader community. She became a member of the Ladies' Aid Society, as she had promised, forging bonds with women such as Silvara Cullorn and Beatrix Peregrinson. She played a key role in organizing a harvest festival for the town. Leveraging her experience from planning school events in Boston, notably, when the town council finally secured funding for a school, they sought Aeloria's expertise in teaching. "It would be a part-time commitment," Mayor Garrison clarified. "We currently have 15 school-aged children, with more expected due to the railroad expansion." Aeloria glanced at Thalorin, seeking his approval. They were in the general store when the mayor presented them with the offer. "The ranch is our priority," Thalorin stated. "However, if you wish to teach Aeloria, I fully support you. From what I've heard, you're an excellent educator." The pride in his voice warmed Aeloria's heart. "I would be delighted to contribute to the establishment of Willow Creek School," she told the mayor. That night, as they prepared dinner together, Aeloria revisited the topic. "Are you genuinely comfortable with me taking on teaching duties? It will reduce the time I can dedicate to ranch work." Thalorin paused his potato peeling to look at her. "Aeloria, your face lights up when you discuss teaching. I wouldn't want to deprive you of that happiness." He put down his knife. "Moreover, you've more than demonstrated your ability to handle both household and ranch responsibilities efficiently. This is different from the position you initially applied for," she noted. "And so are you," he replied with a gentle smile. "In fact, you've exceeded my expectations in every way." The fall roundup kept them both occupied from sunrise to sunset. Aeloria impressed the temporary ranch hands Thalorin had hired with her eagerness to assist in cooking for the crew and even riding out to deliver lunches. By the season's end, she had earned their respect, a notable achievement for an Eastern woman. As the first snow began to dust the distant mountains, Aeloria was taken aback to realize that nearly 4 months had passed since she had disembarked from that stagecoach in tears. The life she had built with Thalorin already felt more tangible and genuine than anything she had known in Boston. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Thalorin reading aloud from a new novel, while Aeloria mended one of his shirts, she was struck by a sudden sense of her own contentment. She set aside her sewing to observe her husband's profile, the firm line of his jaw, the slight crease of concentration between his brows, the way the firelight danced in his hair. "Thalorin," she whispered. He looked up from his book. "Yes, I love you." The words escaped her lips unprompted, surprising her as much as him. They had not spoken of love before their arrangement had begun, as a practical necessity, their growing affection blossoming naturally alongside their partnership. Thalorin carefully set the book aside. "Aeloria," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." She moved to kneel beside his chair. "I didn't anticipate it. I had hoped that we might grow fond of each other, perhaps even develop respect and friendship. But this," she pressed a hand to her chest, "this is love. I am certain of it." Thalorin extended a hand towards her, gently pulling her onto his lap. His arms wrapped around her, providing a sense of strength and security. "I've been hesitant to acknowledge it," he murmured into her hair, fearing that voicing it might shatter the enchantment. He lifted her chin to meet his gaze. "I love you, Aeloria Montclair. I have for weeks, possibly since that first encounter, when you found the bravery to share the truth with me." Their lips met in a kiss that affirmed their confession, more intense and fervent than any they had shared previously. As they reluctantly parted, Aeloria nestled her head against his shoulder. "I never imagined I'd discover this," she murmured. "Not after all that transpired." "Nor did I," Thalorin confessed. "After Lyra, after the war, I believed that part of me was lost forever." They remained in each other's embrace, the fire casting a warm glow in the hearth, snowflakes gently falling outside the window. Two individuals who had anticipated a practical alliance had instead found something far more valuable. A love cultivated from honesty, respect, and the daily commitment to build a life together. Winter enveloped the ranch, bringing shorter days and lengthy nights spent in the coziness of their home. Aeloria's days were filled with ranch duties, preparations for the school's reopening after the new year, and enhancing their house's comfort. She crafted new curtains, wove rugs for the chilly wooden floors, and rearranged furniture to create a more inviting space. Thalorin observed her efforts with gratitude. "You've turned it into a true home," he remarked one evening. "Better than I ever could have alone." "It was already a home," she countered. "I've simply added a woman's touch." The holiday season drew near, accompanied by preparations for the town's festivities. Aeloria assisted in organizing a pageant for the children, teaching them carols and simple recitations. To her surprise, Thalorin volunteered to construct the stable for the nativity scene. "I didn't realize you were so devout," she commented, as he worked on the structure in the barn. "Not particularly," he admitted, "but my father always said a man should contribute to his community in any way he can." He paused his work to look at her. "Besides, I enjoy seeing you with the children. You'll be a wonderful mother someday." The offhand remark stirred a flutter in Aeloria's stomach. They hadn't discussed children explicitly, though the natural course of their marriage suggested the possibility of parenthood in the future. "Would you desire that?" she inquired cautiously. "Children of our own." Thalorin set aside his tools, giving the question the thoughtful consideration it warranted. "Yes," he replied after a moment. "I would. A family to labor for. To pass this land on to someday." He searched her face. "And you?" "I've always wanted children," Aeloria confessed. "Teaching is rewarding, but I long for a family of my own as well." Thalorin approached her, taking her hands in his. "Then we shall have them, with God's will. My goal wasn't merely to inherit the ranch, but to nurture it with affection." The Christmas service at Willow Creek's church was a delightful event. The church was packed with families who had traveled from far and wide. The children's performance brought beaming smiles to the faces of parents and grandparents. Following the service, the community gathered for a feast in the newly built town hall. Thalorin and Aeloria arrived home late, contentedly tired from the festivities. In their bedroom, Thalorin handed Aeloria a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Merry Christmas," he said, a hint of shyness in his voice. Inside, she found a lovely leather-bound journal, its pages empty and ready to be filled. "For your thoughts," Thalorin explained. "You once mentioned keeping a journal in Boston." Moved by his consideration, Aeloria fetched his gift from its hiding spot, a hand-knitted scarf in rich blue wool, a secret project she had worked on during the long evenings. "It's perfect," he declared, immediately wrapping it around his neck despite the room's warmth. Later, as they lay in the darkness, Aeloria whispered, "This has been the happiest Christmas of my life." Thalorin's arms embraced her more tightly. "Mine, too," he murmured, "and it's just the beginning of many more." In January, Willow Creek School officially began classes in a converted storefront, while the permanent schoolhouse was under construction. Aeloria taught 15 students, ranging in age from 6 to 16, 3 days each week. The work was demanding but incredibly fulfilling, and she returned to the ranch each evening with tales of her students' progress and amusing stories about their inquiries. Thalorin listened intently, proud of his wife's achievements. On days when the weather was exceptionally harsh, he would ride into town to accompany her home, unwilling to let her travel alone through the snow or sleet. "You're too overprotective," she teased one windy afternoon as they rode side by side. "Just being careful," he countered. Wyoming winters don't tolerate recklessness. February brought a severe blizzard that cut off the ranch for nearly a week. They stayed close to the house, venturing out only to attend to necessary tasks, using ropes tied between buildings to avoid getting lost in the whiteout conditions. During those snowbound days, they grew even closer, sharing stories they hadn't yet revealed to each other. Thalorin spoke of his war experiences that had altered him so deeply. Aeloria discussed her complicated relationship with her status-conscious parents. "Do you ever miss Boston?" Thalorin asked one night as they lay before the fire, the wind howling outside. Aeloria pondered the question sincerely. "I miss certain things, the libraries, the concerts, some of my former students, but not the life itself." She traced patterns on his chest with her fingertip. "This feels more genuine, somehow more significant. Even when you're snowed in with only me for company," he teased. "Especially then," she replied, pressing a kiss to his lips. As the chill of winter began to fade, the ranch came alive with renewed vigor. Calving season demanded long days and sometimes nights from both of them, with Aeloria swiftly mastering the art of aiding with challenging births. Her steady skill even won the respect of the seasoned ranch hands who returned each year. "Mrs. Montclair's got a natural talent," Hank, the senior hand, remarked to Thalorin with admiration. "She saved that breech calf that would have surely been lost." Thalorin's heart swelled with pride. "She's extraordinary," he agreed, observing as Aeloria skillfully bottle-fed an orphaned calf. In April, as the final remnants of snow vanished from the north-facing hills, Aeloria confirmed her suspicions that had grown over the past few weeks. She was carrying their first child. She broke the news to Thalorin one evening as they strolled the property, examining the fresh spring grass. "Thalorin," she said, pausing beside the creek that flowed through their land, "I have something significant to share with you." He turned to her, worry instantly etched on his face. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," she reassured him, taking his hand and softly placing it on her still flat stomach. "Everything is wonderful. We're going to have a baby." Thalorin's face shifted from concern to awe. "A baby? Are you sure?" Aeloria nodded, her eyes welling up with joyful tears. "Silvara Caelorn confirmed it yesterday. The baby is expected in late October." For a moment, Thalorin seemed speechless. Then, to Aeloria's surprise, he lifted her gently and spun her in a circle, his laughter resonating across the open fields. "Be careful," she protested, laughing with him. "I'm in a delicate state." He set her down immediately, his hands steadying her. "I'm sorry. I'm just overwhelmed. Aeloria, I never imagined I could be this happy." The news of their impending child spread rapidly through the community, bringing well wishes and practical gifts from neighbors. Silvara Caelorn offered to knit blankets, while Beatrix Peregrinson started planning a celebration for the baby's arrival. As Aeloria's body changed with the growing child, Thalorin became increasingly protective, insisting she reduce her teaching to just 2 days a week and hiring extra help for the ranch to ease her workload. "I'm pregnant, not an invalid," she often reminded him, though she appreciated his concern. "Indulge me," he would respond, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "It's my first time being a father." Summer flew by in a whirlwind of activity. The ranch thrived with the largest calf crop they had ever seen. The school term concluded, giving Aeloria time to prepare the house for the baby's arrival. Thalorin crafted a cradle from meticulously chosen wood, working on it in the evenings while Aeloria sewed tiny clothes. As her due date neared, Aeloria sometimes found herself reminiscing about her arrival in Willow Creek. The tearful, frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach less than a year earlier. What a transformation her life had undergone. It was far more fulfilling and meaningful than she had ever envisioned. One October evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Aeloria reached for Thalorin's hand while they sat on the porch. "Do you recall what you told me on that first day?" she inquired. "When I was weeping at the station," Thalorin paused to reflect. "I told you that you didn't need to put on a front with me." "That's right." She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "I believe that was the moment everything shifted for me. No one had ever granted me the freedom to just be myself. Not my family, not my supervisors, not even my friends back in Boston." Thalorin replied, "I simply wanted you to feel at ease. It seemed cruel to demand a display of joy when you were clearly upset." "It was more than that," Aeloria insisted. "It was acceptance. You offered it to me before you knew the first thing about me." Thalorin lifted her hand to his lips. "The best choice I've ever made." Their son entered the world on a crisp October morning, following a lengthy night that pushed Aeloria's limits and tested Thalorin's resolve. Silvara Caelorn, with her skilled hands, delivered the baby safely. "A healthy, robust boy," she declared, placing the crying infant on Aeloria's chest. "He's got a set of lungs on him." Thalorin, who had stood by Aeloria's side throughout her labor, gazed in wonder at his son. "He's flawless," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "They've named him Valacrest, in honor of Thalorin's father." As Aeloria regained her strength, Thalorin proved to be a devoted father, willingly pacing the floor with the fussy infant or changing soiled diapers without a word of complaint. "You're a born father," Aeloria remarked one evening, observing him tenderly rock their son to sleep. "There's nothing innate about it," Thalorin confessed with a rueful smile. "I'm scared of making a mistake. But he's ours, and that makes it worthwhile to figure out." By the time their first wedding anniversary rolled around in November, life had found a new rhythm. Valacrest was growing swiftly, charming them with his first smiles and attempts to sit up. The ranch had experienced its most lucrative year yet, enabling Thalorin to acquire more land and expand their livestock. Aeloria had resumed teaching 1 day a week, bringing Valacrest along. The students were smitten with the baby, and the school board was considering constructing a proper teacher's residence next to the new schoolhouse. To mark their anniversary, Silvara and Eldrin Caelorn offered to watch Valacrest for an evening, granting the young couple a rare night to themselves. Thalorin prepared a special meal, serving it by candlelight in their dining room. "To think," Aeloria mused as they savored a rare bottle of wine, "a year ago today, I was anxious about what my future held." "And now?" Thalorin asked, his eyes reflecting the flickering light. "Now I can't envision any other life but this one." She raised her glass. "To us, Thalorin. To the family and life we're creating together." "To us," he repeated, his eyes filled with love. "To the woman who arrived in tears but found the strength to remain." As they sat by the fire that evening, Aeloria leaned against Thalorin's chest, his arms wrapped around her. Outside, the first snowfall of the season started, covering their land in a pure white sheet. Inside, the heat from their home and their love provided a refuge from the chill. "Have you ever pondered?" Thalorin asked gently, "How things might have turned out if you hadn't been crying that day? If you had come pretending to be perfectly content," Aeloria reflected on this, "I might have kept up the act for longer. I suppose I would have tried to be what I thought you wanted rather than who I am." "I'm glad you didn't," he replied. "I might never have shared my own truths if you hadn't shared yours. Then I suppose we should be thankful for my tears," Aeloria said with a smile. "They brought us here." Thalorin kissed her softly. "No more pretending ever," he vowed. Just this real and genuine. Just this, Aeloria agreed, kissing him back. Outside, the snow kept falling, muting their ranch in quiet. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, its glow flickering across the walls of the home they had constructed together. A home built on honesty, fortified by love, and brimming with hope for the future. The mail-order bride, who had arrived in tears, and the cowboy, who had offered compassion instead of criticism, had discovered something neither had anticipated. Not just a convenient alliance, but a love story penned in truth, with pages yet to be written across the untamed Wyoming frontier. If this story touched you, give it a like, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in their shoes? Subscribe to Frontier Stories and join us as we continue to tell stories of hope, resilience, and the beautiful, messy truth of Wild West.